and the estradiol goes up from 6.47 to 10.24 and up to 11.99. So you think, case closed. Obviously it aromatizes to some extent, right? Wrong, at least in my opinion. When you actually go look at how they measured these biomarkers, you can see here. What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about EQ or Boldenone. This is a compound that is heavily debated as to, is it an efficacious compound? Is it something that's worth using in an off season? Is this a good overall muscle builder? How potent is it at building muscle? Should it be dosed higher or lower than testosterone? Is it a good option as monotherapy if you are prone to estrogenic side effects from testosterone? Can it be replaced as a testosterone base? It's often lumped into that narrow category of compounds that can serve as test bases because of their interaction with aromatase. Being a substrate for aromatase allows you to fulfill that pathway in the body whereby you facilitate neuroprotection, cardioprotection, the GH-IGF-1 axis and downstream growth factor production, all these certain things that are facilitated by adequate estrogen production. And EQ commonly lumped into the test-based category, and I have mistakenly put it there myself in the past without delving deeper into it, which I should have done. And that's what we're going to be doing in this one. In this video, I'm going to be talking about exactly how it interacts with aromatase. Is it an aromatase inhibitor in itself? And can it serve as a test base? So countless blood tests now I've seen through the grapevine as well as sent to me personally. Just an abundance now at this point. It's just been piling up to the point where I was like, hey, we need to make a video on this. Showing that EQ lowers estradiol levels in blood work. So rather than, I'm sure you've probably heard the saying, EQ, it aromatizes half as much as testosterone. And it's like just taken at face value that is exactly what happens without nobody really fact checking this. Everyone just assuming because it's in Llewellyn's book Anabolics that this must be true. This is why people think it is, can serve as a makeshift test base for those prone to estrogenic side effects. Because if you take, let's just say, 400 milligrams of testosterone and you can't even use that without using Aromacin, Arimidex, whatever, then maybe, you could theoretically use EQ, which is, anabolic and less androgenic relatively. So you could get away with a higher dose of EQ and have less estrogenic issues than you would if you used the same dose of testosterone. That's what the theory is, because it aromatizes half as much as test, which obviously makes sense on paper. But when you dig into it, is this actually the case? Or is it just us taking this as a factual statement, just like the nandrolone aromatizes at 20% the rate of testosterone? Like, we've seen how not true that actually is in practical application. So why would the same not apply to EQ? Anyway, so the first thing I want to present, this is actually a very, very intelligent and well presented consolidation of the evidence supporting it's kind of like, some people think it acts as an aromatase inhibitor. So this is the first theory that's been proposed. So a lot of people have taken note of how it lowers estradiol levels in the blood. And the first mechanism that's proposed, and I'm talking about not just like on its own, like when I'm talking about an aromatase inhibitor, I mean, when it's used in conjunction with testosterone, it's literally lowering estrogen levels. So if it's something that's supposed to aromatize at half the rate of testosterone, you would expect at least some elevation of estradiol, like to some extent. Regardless if it's competing or not competing or whatever, you would expect it to convert to estradiol and have at least some estradiol in your blood work. But it seems like the actual opposite occurs, whereby if you use it in tandem with testosterone or something else that aromatizes, it seems to lower the actual amount of estradiol produced. And that's, before I get off track, I have my own thoughts on it that I'm going to present after I present this very well consolidated Reddit post. So this is something I was sent a while back, and I'm just getting around to it now because I've, since compiled more information on my own and sort of come to my own conclusion. But I'm going to read through this with you guys first, just so you can get a sense of the argument behind its potential interaction with aromatase as like an inhibitor, like something you would think like Aromacin, Arimidex, Letrozole. There's a theory going around that metabolites of Boldenone are actually what inhibit the enzyme aromatase and then prevent, testosterone from aromatizing to estrogen properly.
Okay, I found this on the web for going around that metabolites of boldenone are actually white inhibit the enzyme aromatase, and then prevent aromatize or decidin properly. Check it out.
What the fuck? Siri's trying to tell me about metabolites of boldenone that inhibit aromatase. What the fuck? This thing never picks up my voice for anything. And then I'll say something super random in a video and then all of a sudden it tries to like help me answer the question. The last time it did this in the middle of a video, I was talking about injecting cows with trenbolone and then it started talking. This shit never happens. Like, what the fuck? Anyways, gonna leave that over there. Hopefully it can't hear me this time. Okay, so this is the Reddit post here, and this is very well done. Basically, I'm just gonna read it through. So for some time now, this question has plagued steroid boards. This subreddit in particular, and has led to meaningless arguments belittling others. Blah, 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 blah. Some claim it caused a need to raise aromatase inhibitor dosing, which is kind of like the original thought process whereby you would assume, well, there's more aromatization occurring, so you have more estrogen, so why would you not need more of an AI? That would be like, the traditional outlook of what people would think happens when you use EQ. But anyways, some claim blood work E2 was the same for two of the same cycles, except one had EQ and the other didn't. And of course, some claim EQ to lower their E2. I don't think any of these users should be written off or disregarded. This is all valuable info. We are all different and will metabolize drugs differently. All we can do is make ourselves aware and become our own science experiment. I am making this post to hopefully compile what we know so that users may inform themselves in an easy to read format so that these users may make their own choices. Aromatization, the book Anabolics by Llewellyn. So this is where you originally heard the rate of conversion is roughly half that of testosterone in regards to Boldenone's aromatization rate. And he cites a study in here. This study, when referencing the rate of conversion, blah, blah, blah. I struggled to find Boldenone listed in the study, but I am 100% no expert. I very well may be missing it with the way they are calling out the chemical names or something. If somebody finds it, I will update this info. Update. I have not heard from anyone else. And considering a Boldenone mentioned to be missing from the study, read the note below for what may have happened. Now, the above reference only applies to Anabolics ebook 2011 and presumably earlier revisions. In Anabolics, the 11th edition, 2017, the most recent revision, Llewellyn changes the reference for Boldenone's aromatization from the above to role of androgens in growth and development of fetus, child, and adolescent. The research journal has arrived and Boldenone does not seem to be mentioned in the study as well. I do not know why Llewellyn would miscite a source like this, but it may be that he originally made a mistake and instead of correcting, he changed his citation to a hard to find study. This is obviously speculation and should not be regarded as fact. I will scan the pages and upload the study myself for others to view when I get a chance. And the fact that the citation was changed seems a bit odd to me as well. So link to the study that is mentioned here. And then he has a screenshot of literally every single page in the study. Like, this guy has dug hard to find this information and I commend him for going out of his way to consolidate this for us. And I'm not gonna go through this entire thing with you guys, but you can dig through it if you want. And basically, end of the story, Boldenone's not in it. So pay attention to the ADD and aromatization section below. It could be a mistake on Llewellyn's part, as one of the ADD's names it goes by is Boldenone, very similar to Boldenone. ADD is actually listed in the study Llewellyn cites in the original 2011 edition and presumably earlier ones, and is shown to also aromatize around the same rate that he claims Boldenone aromatizes at. I wouldn't think Llewellyn would have made a mistake like this, but seeing he changes references in his latest revision and the mention is still missing, I don't know, something is fishy. So other studies suggesting Boldenone aromatizes. In this study with rabbits, they had 3 groups, 1 controlled, 2 experimental groups. The synopsis of the results is there was a significant decrease in circulating testosterone and a significant increase in estradiol between control and the experimental groups receiving different doses. Here's the abstract. Blah, blah, blah. The bold is what you need to know here. Boldenone. Good pun. Groups treated with Boldenone had a significantly decreased serum testosterone level, simultaneously with a significantly increased estradiol level. In the study, they go on to speculate that this is due to Boldenone aromatizing. However, the increase in serum estradiol concentration could be due to aromatization of Boldenone, as testosterone is the primary substrate for the synthesis of estradiol in males. So this is a study I'm going to circle back to in my interpretation after, because there's a very prominent issue in it, which we're going to get into after. So boldenone metabolite 1,4-diendione or 1,4-diendione. I don't know how to pronounce it. There are the two names. Various steroid articles have given this supposed metabolite that is a potent AI, in quotations, potent AI, because we don't actually know if it is. They have all spread this claim, and to the best of my knowledge, this compound doesn't exist, at least not in how they state it. I did a quick search in PubChem. One potential result was found. This compound is I'm not gonna even try and say it, blah, blah, blah. This is interesting, but the methyl hydroxy throws it all off. Another PubChem search. 0 results found. This makes sense as the structure of the word makes little sense when discussing chemical names. PubChem is not perfect. Let's try Google and see if there's anything else. First result is a Wikipedia page for diendione. Someone is free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the numbers before are coefficients, and 1,4-diendione wouldn't be the same as diendione. Various research websites stating various compounds that include parts of 1,4-diendione wording, but it's all broken and nothing kept in order. You can search Google to include the exact wording by using quotation marks, which is what I did. Searching 1,4-diendione. First result, and others bring up androsta 1,4-diendione. Maybe the steroid article was the first to write about the substance, forgot to type up the full name. There isn't much on this when you Google it. The most I was able to find is listed in a book of chemicals that causes birth defects, steroids on microplates with fixed silica gel, and one pertaining to keto steroids. None of the studies are really useful outside of the keto steroid study that gives a chemical structure depiction that'll bring up again later. The other result is for hydroxy androsta 1,4-diendione and the source of androgenic activity in African wood. This is the only time I can find this steroid mentioned. Searching 1,4-diendione. This is 100% a typo. Again, this makes sense as the structure of the word makes little sense when discussing chemical names. Okay, we are seemingly getting nowhere, just trying to search for the terms, the various articles listed. If there is a metabolite of boldenone that acts as an AI, that means that there has to be a study showing it's a metabolite. Let's look at what research shows for the boldenone metabolites. All of boldenone's metabolites from a human study. So it has a few different studies involving metabolites, some humans, some animals. So here's a full list. Here he puts in bold, another pun. He puts in bold the ones that are the notable mentions. Every metabolite listed aside from the two bold are rarely talked about outside of just being a metabolite of boldenone, nothing suggesting or denying that it may have AI effects. To keep this simple, we will just focus on the two relevant compounds. Blah, 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 aka 1AD. It seems studies will shorten this name to 1AD when using a chemical name. That term keeps things simple when you must reference something over and over again. For that purpose, 1AD will be how I reference this compound throughout the rest of the post. Before we divulge more into this compound, let's look at all the names it goes by, just to be sure 1,4-diendione isn't a known alternative for 1AD. Synonyms of 1AD. So he goes through all of them here. What's 1AD? A synthetic androgen and anabolic steroid. Is a 5-alpha reduced isomer of the endogenous steroid 4-androstenedione and acts as a prohormone of 1-testosterone. I'm laughing at the way I said it, sorry. 1AD and AI properties. 1AD, along with some others, were in a study to look at it as a potential candidate for blocking breast cancer biosynthesis. The study shows 1AD may be promising for it to be a potential source for lowering E2 while on boldenone. Here's a blurb from the extract. In bold, 1AD is a potent inhibitor of aromatase activity and CYP19 mRNA expression. These data establish that 1AD is a potent chemical agent against breast cancer via aromatase inhibitory mechanism. See major issue with all the studies showing AI effects below. Let's move on to the next metabolite, blah, 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 aka ADD. It seems studies will shorten the name to ADD. This keeps things simple. The metabolite from the study listing boldenone metabolites immediately caught my eye. It looks similar to 1,4-diendione. Obviously, this is still very different, but before we divulge more into this compound, let's look at all the names it goes by, just to make sure 1,4-diendione isn't a known alternative name for it. So he goes through all the alternative names for it. What is it? It's an anabolic androgenic steroid related to boldenone and testosterone, bearing 2 double bonds in C1 and C4 positions. It's said to rapidly metabolize to boldenone. This can be confirmed in another study showing boldenone as a metabolite. This guy even cited every single thing he wrote here. It's awesome. So that is interesting. Boldenone found ADD to be a metabolite of it, and vice versa. ADD found boldenone to be a metabolite of it. These compounds both metabolize to each other. ADD and AI properties. ADD, along with some others, were in a study to study / hypothesize mechanisms of action on aromatase. This study shows ADD may be promising for it to be a potential source for lowering E2 while on boldenone. Here's a blurb from the extract. In bold, compounds previously reported to be competitive inhibitors of aromatase cause a time-dependent loss of aromatase activity in human placental microsomes. We report that ADD also caused a similar loss of aromatase activity. See major issue with all the studies showing AI effects below. ADD and aromatization. What's also interesting is in that same study, 1962 study from Anabolics ebook 2011, that is supposed to be showing Boldenone's rate of conversion to estradiol is roughly half of testosterone. It's also listing this compound's ADD rate of conversion to estradiol at roughly 58% of testosterone. It is something to consider when trying to justify this as a potential source for lowering E2 while on Boldenone. Let's move on to the next metabolite. WADA study on bold metabolizing to AI ATD. So it's banned by WADA. It is also used in a pro-hormone supplement by Gaspari Nutrition at a time as an aromatase inhibitor or a potent, I guess, an anabolic agent in some context, depending on how you look at it. So what is it? It is an AI that metabolizes to Boldenone, and in a WADA study actually shows ATD to be a metabolite of Boldenone as well. Similar to ADD, conversion works both ways. Study shows ATD may be promising for a potential source for lowering E2 while on Boldenone. In the study, looking at it, these findings imply that the potent inhibition of estrogen biosynthesis caused by these steroids results primarily from a decrease in enzyme activity caused by enzyme-generated intermediates from parent steroids. 1,4-diendione, mistake or just plain wrong? Okay, so what about Androsta 1,4-diendione, the thing that came up on Google when searching 1,4-diendione. It is the only thing remotely close to what we talked about earlier. Well, as I had said, we do have the chemical structure depiction of Androsta 1,4-diendione. Maybe Androsta 1,4-diendione is another way to write one of the three metabolites we found, 1-AD, ADD, and ATD. That isn't just listed on PubChem. Let's compare the chemical structure depictions of each, 1-AD, ADD, ATD. I bolded ADD as those are in fact the same compounds. I actually got help here from my friends, Stolen Lunches and Radical Research, as I originally thought they were different because of the hydrogen atoms not being shown, but have since learned a bit more about drawing the chemical structures. Hydrogen atoms can and usually are left out when drawing chemical structures. The exception to this is when the hydrogen atom is deviating from what can be assumed, i.e. the direction is different from the assumed. Otherwise, it is reasonable to assume this information without having to draw them. Now, this links the Androsta 1,4-diendione we found earlier on Google to in fact being ADD. Why was this not a listed way PubChem showed as a synonym of ADD? It is because the study that shows ADD written as Androsta 1,4-diendione is not a study you will find on PubChem, and PubChem uses only names linked in studies on PubChem for its synonyms list. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, what about 1,4-diendione? Is this a mistake or just plain wrong? There are three possible thoughts if ADD is what the original author meant. Whoever the original author was that wrote about this was talking about ADD and went to write it as Androsta 1,4-diendione, but mistakenly left off the Androsta and called it 1,4-diendione. This would be the original author assuming a lot from its audience, let's face it guys, and should have wrote the full thing so it could be understood universally. And frankly, I totally agree with this. Like anyone, even when I try to bring up compound names, like if I'm talking about nandrolone decanoate, often I'll just write deca because it's more universally understood, even though it makes absolutely no sense if you actually think about it. Like decanoate is an ester. It's not the actual drug. It's the thing that, but people understand nandrolone decanoate as deca. So I'll like put in my titles, you know, deca, so more people understand what I'm talking about. Like obviously that's a huge stretch compared to this, but like at least put it as like the most universally understood version of the correct, you know, like chemical name rather than the most obscure one, you know what I mean? So I totally agree with that. One could assume that in the context of discussing androgens that 1,4-diendione is specifically referencing ADD. Here's potentially why. I'll preface this with this notation. 1,4-diendione is not official or appropriate, but being in a context where the reader understands we are discussing the details of a common 19-carbon androstane skeleton, one could use it, but no, leaving it out is wrong. 1,4-dien signifies that the double bonded carbons at the 1 and 4 position of the carbon skeleton. Dione is referring to the ketones bonded at the 3 and 17 position. In the context of discussing androgens, the dione would have to be at the 3 and 17 position. Any other isomers would be inactive as the oxygens wouldn't be present at the 3 and 17 and related to androgens. This would give us the chemical structure for ADD. The original author referred to this as 1,4-diendione as being a potent AI. I think this would be very misleading if referring to ADD as ADD itself is an anabolic androgenic steroid. That just so happens to have AI-like effects, but also aromatizes, therefore misleading. The original author was never trying to reference ADD as the entire thing was a typo / mistake / maybe even made up. Referencing ATD as a potent AI would have made a lot more sense. Any way you look at it, 1,4-dienedione is botched and should not be used. Major issue with all the studies showing its AI effects. The biggest issue with 1AD, ADD, ATD studies showing AI-like effects are that they seem to be in vitro. But, so is the alleged original study Llewellyn references in Anabolics and assuming earlier versions. Again, the newer study Llewellyn references in Anabolics 2017 appears to be in children. We all should know in vitro studies do not always translate perfectly in the human body. There's a lot more complexities to our bodies that in vitro and animal studies will not be the optimal study to cite, but they shouldn't be disregarded either. Just understand the variables and what happens in vitro may not happen in the human body the same way. And then he links the disadvantages of in vitro. Keep in mind when referencing this post, genetic variability. Some people may metabolize Boldenone to ADD, 1AD or ATD at a higher rate than others, or may hyper-respond to these metabolites as some individuals do with various drugs. Also, just as some respond to aromacin and some do not, similar action may be at play here. Some may not even metabolize Boldenone in ways that lead to the result of ADD, 1AD, or ATD. The human body is complex and there are many factors to consider. In conclusion, to answer the question, does Boldenone aromatize or act as an AI? The answer is they both might occur in the human body. The real questions to ask are, how much does Boldenone aromatize in your body, if at all? How much of Boldenone gets metabolized to ADD, 1AD, or ATD in your body, if at all? How sensitive to the AI effects of ADD, 1AD, or ATD are you? Ultimately, like with all things drug related, there's not always a concrete answer, and with AAS, it is up to us, the user, to experiment with our own body and find what works for us. Then he references literally everything he talks about, which is awesome. And then too long didn't read, bullet points. Mixed bag of reviews on how Boldenone affects E2. Anabolics book popularized the opinion that it aromatizes half as much as test. The metabolite thing doesn't really make sense, or it doesn't add up. It's either incorrect, informal, or maybe even made up. No matter which way you view the possibilities, it is botched and shouldn't be used. The metabolites that may be responsible for AI-like effects in some are 1AD, ADD, and ATD. The biggest mistake with all the AI-like effects studies are they are in vitro. Not that they should be disregarded, but be aware that it's in vitro. We all metabolize drugs differently. Nobody's experience should be written off. And yeah, so that is the full thing. And then there are a lot of anecdotal reports here, like this guy, 900 tests and 700 NPP and 0 AI. His E2 was crashed with 900 EQ. Got blood work too late to confirm, but I had all the low E2 sides, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so there is a lot of stuff in here. And I kind of want to dig into my evidence now and give my interpretation. So the first thing that I want to note is the rabbit study. So in this study, it is called Effects of Boldenone. I don't even know how to pronounce this ester. Undeclinate on growth performance, maintenance behavior, reproductive hormones, and carcass traits of growing rabbits. So in this study, they basically injected rabbits with Boldenone, and it's monotherapy. There's no test here, so you would expect this is a very easy way to tell exactly what Boldenone's doing, because if you are using an exogenous anabolic androgenic steroid, it's going to suppress your testosterone. And if estrogen increases at all, you can only attribute it to the fact that, well, whatever compound you're using must be a potent substrate for aromatase then, because how else could you increase your estrogen when you're decreasing your test? Because test is normally what aromatizes to estradiol, right? So if you're lowering your test by suppressing yourself, but your estradiol is going up, then obviously the EQ is increasing estradiol levels. So in this study, they administered the rats Boldenone monotherapy. And you see in the before and after, and he touched on this in his compilation there. Notice the controls, 2.96 nanograms per milliliter testosterone, 6.47 nanograms per milliliter estradiol. In the experimental groups, you can see that testosterone is indeed suppressed, 1.73 nanograms per milliliter and 1.64 nanograms per milliliter in the experiment groups. And the estradiol goes up from 6.47 to 10.24 and up to 11.99. So you think, case closed. Obviously it aromatizes to some extent, right? Wrong, at least in my opinion. When you actually go look at how they measured these biomarkers, you can see here, blood samples were collected from each animal from the ear vein at 30 days from the last injection of all groups in clean sterilized tubes. Serum samples were separated and preserved for subsequent hormonal assay. Serum testosterone and estradiol were determined using electrochemiluminescence immunoassay, our favorite shitty test, ECLIA kits. It had been measured by Roche ECLIA using associated reagents such as blah, 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 blah. So what's the problem with ECLIA methodology? So this is the test that causes the cross detection of other estrogens in the body. If you've seen my videos on nandrolone monotherapy, you've probably seen, or my sensitive assay estradiol video, you've probably seen that I did an experiment where I used the exact same sample of blood and ran ECLIA methodology on it. I used Roche ECLIA electrochemiluminescence radioimmunoassay and got a 36.8 picogram per milliliter estradiol level. This is on nandrolone only. So it looks pretty decent. It looks like nandrolone probably converts to some estradiol, right? Wrong. When you go, well, it does to some extent, but that's not through a direct pathway. But anyways, that's something I've discussed in other videos. What you actually see though is I ran liquid chromatography with tandem mass spectrometry on the exact same blood. The exact same blood. This is literally the same sample. And you can see here, 9.9 picograms per milliliter. So why is there such a vast difference? It's like the entire reference range. The problem is that electrochemiluminescence immunoassay results cross-detect other estrogens in the body. I don't know why it's so shitty, but it is. This is probably the exact same reason why testosterone, the standard default testosterone serum test cross-detects nandrolone and other anabolic androgenic steroids that aren't testosterone as testosterone and artificially inflates your test levels on paper, when in reality, if you use liquid chromatography, the tandem mass spectrometry, you'd see that your test is in the toilet. And this is the exact same thing. If you looked at my DECA only video, I did the exact same thing again for this experiment. I did both serum total testosterone using the same blood. I did liquid chromatography with tandem mass spectrometry on the same blood to get a total test. So this was on nandrolone. Total testosterone, 838 nanograms per deciliter with an 11.8 free. Looks pretty normal, right? Looks like you're probably on some test. No, I'm actually on only nandrolone and no test. And when you evaluate the same blood using high sensitivity testing, you can see that my total test is actually 20.0 nanograms per deciliter, which is lower than your girlfriend, and 0.53 free testosterone. So these tests pretty much suck balls to assess any kind of synthetic androgen, anabolic steroid. So already we know that these estradiol values in the rabbit study are artificially inflated likely, or even if they're not. To determine the way I concluded that they're artificially inflated, I'll explain later, or next. Not later, it's going to be in like 2 minutes. But anyway, so we saw the estradiol go up, but what it doesn't show you in this study is estrone levels, which is the same problem with the DECA. When you take nandrolone, your estrone goes through the roof. Estrone, this is something that gets elevated by nandrolone. And this is kind of the logic behind the backdoor pathway to the conversion to estradiol through estrone, which in actuality doesn't really occur to a significant extent, unfortunately. But with that being said, it still spikes estrone levels significantly. And we can see this in a lot of nandrolone studies during a pilot study evaluating the possible beneficial effect of nandrolone decanoate, blah, blah, blah. Patients with rheumatoid arthritis, there was a significant increase in serum levels of estrone. Despite the fact that estrone can convert to estradiol, we can clearly see that the amount this actually happens in the body is minimal based on the consistently skewed ratios of androgens to estradiol in the blood test results of nandrolone only cycles. So anyway, that was my findings from the nandrolone. So this is sort of like relevant, and I could sort of relate it to the Boldenone because you automatically know off the bat you can't take at face value an ECLIA methodology result of estradiol. So keep in mind, this is showing an increase, so you might logically think, okay, perhaps that there is some aromatization occurring, and there is, but it's not to estradiol, which is what we're going to get into next. So another anecdotal report came from Vigorous Steve. If you've ever seen his channel, he's a very good channel. I defer to him on a lot of bodybuilding pharmacology information and whatnot. And he has tried EQ before on a gram of test. He's a very, big proponent of, well, I shouldn't say proponent. He's just, individually responds very well to testosterone only cycles, and he pushes it pretty high on them. But he's done in the past, experimented himself, and he's gone up to a gram of test with a gram of EQ. And he said he required less AI when he had the EQ in. He used 12.5 milligrams Aromacin 5 times per week during that cycle, when normally he needs 12.5 milligrams every day on 1,000 milligrams of test. So he needed less AI despite using double the amount of anabolics with something in there that supposedly aromatizes at half the rate of testosterone. So you'd expect, you know, your estrogen would be way up and you need more AI, but that wasn't the case for him. On top of that, another guy who is somebody I was going back and forth with about his experience with EQ, he actually sent me his high sensitivity blood work, and I'm going to show it here. So February 18th, 2019, he started a blast of 400 milligrams of testosterone cypionate, 200 milligrams of nandrolone and phenylpropionate weekly, and he needed 0.25 milligrams of Arimidex twice a week to keep his estrogen side effects at bay. Fast forward to May 31st, 2019, he started a cruise of TRT with just 100 milligrams of test sip and 900 IU HCG, 300 IU 3 times a week. July 19th, he got full bloods done. The labs showed he had 75 picogram per milliliter estradiol on just his replacement, you know, TRT with HCG. So he had a good feeling they would come back fine. So we started an EQ cycle of 400 mgs of test sip, 300 milligrams of EQ, 20 milligrams of Anavar. Keep in mind, on only 100 milligrams test sip and 900 IU HCG, he had a 75 picogram per milliliter estradiol. Now he's on 4 times the amount of test with 300 EQ, which is supposedly something that converts at half the rate of test to estrogen, and 20 milligrams of Anavar. So he gets labs in the middle of the blast in September with a result of 24 picograms per milliliter of estradiol. On the 6th of September, he settles on dropping EQ to 100 milligrams to reduce side effects, and he drops the VAR as well. And then he hops off back to TRT on 100 milligrams of test, 900 HCG per week, IU. So the first thing I asked, of course, was the E2 determined via sensitive assay or Roche ECLIA? And he says he always gets ultra sensitive LCMS-MS assay for his estradiol blood work. So that is another individual, and this was, you know, confirmed that it was high sensitivity testing and not just, you know, standard crappy default ECLIA methodology that showed lowering of estradiol despite being on way more gear and being on way more tests. Another video that was sent to me, and this one was really interesting. This guy actually checked his estrone levels on a small blast of testosterone and EQ.
I'm running, on this blood work, I'm running 800 plus, so a little more, maybe like 840, 850 milligrams of EQ a week and 250 milligrams of test a week.
Okay, my mistake, it's not a small blast. He's doing quite a bit of EQ. But anyway, so he's on a fairly high dose of EQ, and he's on a, you know, what many would consider a small dose of test.
Yeah, I'll put it on the screen. Very interesting. This is kind of why I wanted to test this shit out, you know what I mean? My estrone, which is the E1, was way high, way up out of range. And no one ever gets this tested, but I do remember reading some past studies saying that the EQ aromatizes into E1, which is estrone, and it does. So if we look, I'm pulling, what, 662 picograms per milliliter, and the top of the reference range is 65. So it's like 10 times plus estrone reading. And then if we look at my E2, it's undetectable. And this is a sensitive test by Estradiol, so, or E2, it's sensitive E2, so it's the best test you can get, most accurate, so there's no false reading on the E2. Less than 2.5, and if anybody knows anything about E2, that's bad. You don't want it that crashed.
Okay, so this guy, he's on almost a gram of EQ and like a, I guess, generous TRT dose of testosterone. You can see here, everything's high sensitivity testing, so this is very insightful. Estrone through the roof, 662. You would never see this on testosterone only. His testosterone level, we can confirm his testosterone is actually testosterone because he has a 1,431 nanogram per deciliter test level, and it's confirmed via LCMS. So if he was using just a normal test, he would probably have the EQ potentially, you know, interfere with his getting an accurate reading here. But because everything's high sensitivity, we can actually interpret what's actually going on. You can see the estradiol is in the toilet, undetectable. So he's on, what was it, like 250 milligrams of test? Let me go back and listen again.
EQ just test. So I'm running, on this blood work, I'm running 800 plus, so a little more, maybe like 840, 850 milligrams of EQ a week, and 250 milligrams of test a week.
Okay, so he's on 250 test and 840 EQ per week. So on this much test, you would 100% have estradiol. Having like even a fraction of that, like even your normal production of fucking 50 milligrams a week, you would have way more estradiol than this. You would have like a 30 probably. So this guy has less than, like, menopausal women have like better E2s than this. And this is sensitive assay, undetectable. So something in there is preventing the testosterone from aromatizing to estradiol, because he definitely has enough tests in there as verified by his total testosterone level, 1,431, with high sensitivity testing, not getting cross detection of other synthetic anabolics, but the estrone through the fucking roof. So we can start to piece together what's actually going on here. And I think what happened is in that rabbit study, the ECLIA methodology was cross-detecting estrone and artificially inflating the estradiol results. On this guy's blood work, it's verifying his estrogen's high and his estradiol is low and his testosterone is normal. So obviously there's something going on with its interaction with aromatase. And this kind of verifies that with EQ, you would probably have to use exogenous estradiol with it to be healthy at all, or even like get the most out of it, because it literally fucks with the enzyme itself. So you can't get around it. Like if it's inhibiting it in some capacity, no matter how much shit you're using, if you're on a high dose of EQ and like lesser of the other shit you're using, you're not getting any estradiol. Like you're gonna have to like pop E2 tabs or use transdermal estrogel or something like that, or injections of estradiol valerate or something like that, which the injections or the transdermal are probably more ideal than the oral, in my opinion, based on all the reasons I've outlined in my previous videos about exogenous estradiol. But anyways, you would probably need to use exogenous estradiol with EQ. So the principal pathway, by like some people might think, like first of all, it's impossible to produce this much naturally. So estrone is normally endogenously produced through androstenedione as an intermediate, and it's transformed to estrone via the enzyme aromatase. So it interacts with aromatase to get to this estrone, and this reaction occurs in both the gonads and in certain other tissues, particularly adipose tissue, and estrone is subsequently secreted from these tissues. In addition to aromatization of androstenedione, estrone is also formed reversibly from estradiol by the enzyme 17-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase in various tissues, including the liver, uterus, and mammary gland. So obviously a bit less relevant for men, but regardless, you would never see these levels endogenously ever in men. These estrone levels make no sense. So first of all, we have many men indicating that their need for aromatase inhibitors goes down, their estrogen's going down despite being on shit ton of tests when they use EQ. Now we see guys who are verifying that they have super high estrone levels with legitimate tests in their system, and something's completely blockading the interaction with aromatase. So this is where the hypothesis I have comes in. So some of the, the metabolites of EQ being aromatase inhibitors, I am not really sure that that is the case. Rather, I think what happens is that EQ inherently competes for aromatase itself, because we can clearly see it's not that something is inhibiting activity of the enzyme exactly. It's not like there's like, aromacin or something that's just like chilling there and like blocking estrogens from being produced or something. A shit ton of estrone is going up. So I don't think there's like a full inhibition going on here. I think rather it's that EQ is competing with testosterone and beating the fuck out of it. Because what we've seen, this is something I touched on recently in a video too, is the testosterone to estrogen ratio in the body. You'll notice in the supraphysiological dose of testosterone studies, dose-dependent graded response studies where they go up to 600 milligrams in humans, the testosterone to estrogen ratio, the higher the dose of test, the more skewed it becomes in favor of the testosterone. So you see at like 25 milligrams, you have a total E2 to T ratio in young men of about 1.2%. At 50 milligrams, it goes down to like 0.7%. 125 goes down to 0.4, and it continues to decrease. So what that indicates is there is a cap on aromatase. It's not like you take every milligram of test that you inject into yourself has enough enzymatic activity available to it through aromatase to convert an exact, proportional amount of estradiol that would normally be produced through endogenous androgen production. Rather, it goes down because there's only so much estradiol that can be produced through aromatase activity. Eventually, you get to a point where your testosterone to estrogen ratio is like way more dominant for one or the other, and it's the total testosterone because there's only so much aromatase that can do what it's supposed to do. If you're injecting a ridiculous amount, way more than the body can produce, there's a cap on how much estradiol can actually be produced. So expectedly, the E2 to T ratio decreases as you increase your dose of test. So if there's a cap on aromatase, what's that mean for testosterone and EQ exactly? I've sort of already presented my hypothesis, but just to reiterate and conclude it. So it's reasonable to assume that similar to, how anti-androgens will compete for androgen receptor activation and stuff like that. I don't think this is totally different. I think this is EQ essentially competing with testosterone for aromatase and beating it a lot and converting a shit ton of estrone through aromatase, and testosterone's just chilling. And as a result of that, I think this is very similar to what you see with finasteride, for example. When you inhibit 5-alpha reductase, another enzyme in the body, what happens? Testosterone tries to 5-alpha reduce to DHT, but it can't because finasteride is, doing its thing with 5-alpha reductase. So what happens to the testosterone? It can't convert to DHT. So what's the subsequent result of that? Your testosterone and estradiol levels go up because there's no conversion occurring. So now there is more testosterone and more ability to convert to estrogen. So this is just a different version of that sort of thing. So we have aromatase being inhibited. So what happens as a result of that? Not being inhibited, but being occupied by a greater drug load probably, and perhaps something with a better binding affinity too. So what happens is you probably are actually going to get an elevation of testosterone because you have no more being converted to estrogen, and you probably have more 5-alpha reduction into DHT. I wouldn't be surprised if testosterone and DHT levels on blood work actually go up when you use EQ, but your E2 probably goes in the toilet and your estrone goes through the fucking roof. So that's what I think is going on here. And you have to consider too, when people use EQ, it's always at a super high dose. You never really see a guy doing 500 tests with 200 EQ. It's always 500 tests with 700 EQ. I don't know where this rule came from, but there's been through the grapevine of the bro science, has come this rule that if you're not using 700 EQ or 600 or 700, that it's pointless because it's too weak to do anything. So most guys that are using EQ are using 500, 600, 700 on top of their test, and their test is almost always less than their EQ. So what's the result of that? We can clearly see that you're not going to be getting any aromatization or a significantly less amount of aromatization to estradiol as a result of perhaps using something that has a better binding affinity, or it's just that the drug load is so strong in comparison. We've seen, anti-androgens with binding affinities way shittier than testosterone and DHT can still be very potent anti-androgens if the drug load is simply increased to such an extent that it overwhelms the androgens at AR. And this is seen with cyproterone, acetate, bicalutamide, these drugs that are kind of shitty on paper, but if you use a high enough dosage of them, they're very good at competing with androgens for AR. The same thing probably happens with EQ. If you use enough of it, it's going to knock out a bunch of fucking tests and prevent it from aromatizing. And you're just gonna get all that estrone that comes from the EQ. So obviously there are, a lot of speculation is gonna come out of this. Some people are going to think that, perhaps you got nandrolone labeled as EQ and all these guys just got the wrong drug. But personally, I doubt it's a coincidence. A lot of these guys anybody who goes to the extent of posting this kind of stuff or has experience to this extent is probably decently well connected that is doing these elaborate blood tests, to be honest. So I would assume they'd be able to tell by this point if they're on EQ or if they're on nandrolone, and they're probably not getting fake gear and they're not getting nandrolone instead of EQ. And it's just, there's so many accounts of it now. I don't think it's a coincidence at this point that this many people have reported this much, happening. So I don't know, is it just the case that the dosage of EQ and the interaction with aromatase is individual dependent and blah, blah, blah? I don't really know, but at the end of the day, I think the actual scenario, like I said, is that EQ occupies aromatase and it actually, you know, interacts with it, whereas testosterone is essentially like knocked out of competition just via straight up competition and being outworked essentially by a better or higher drug load potentially. And that's where, like, why, how else could you get a super high estrone if it wasn't like going through aromatase? Like, it has to. So it's not inhibiting it, it's going through it and doing something. So obviously it's not, that's what I think. If the metabolites were AIs, then you wouldn't have estrogens increasing at all. Like, the aromatase enzyme would be inhibited. But that's not the case. The estrone is going through the roof. So that is my stance. I think EQ is very potent at interacting with aromatase, and it simply converts to a shit ton of estrone. And to be honest, perhaps the estrone isn't even what it is. Maybe that's a cross detection too. Like, we'd have to see. Like, one thing you do realize when you look at this guy's blood work is he has estrone serum levels that aren't, he's not using high sensitivity estrone testing either. So maybe it's not even estrone. Maybe it's some other weird fucking estrogen that's artificially spiking the estrone levels. I don't know. Either way, it's not estradiol. And that is concerning because estrone is, despite still being an agonist of estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta, it is like 4% as potent as estradiol as being an agonist of these receptors. So not only do we have a compound, and this is something I'm going to delve into in another video. A lot of people have been, you know, reminding me to post my video about what I think about EQ in general and, you know, the kidney toxicity and whatnot. So not only do we have a compound that is potentially very nephrotoxic in itself, but it may crush estradiol levels, which is not only going to be cardio and neurotoxic, but it's also going to inhibit a significant amount of downstream cascades that come through the result of the GH-IGF-1 axis relying on sufficient estradiol via aromatization. So you're going to be inhibiting growth, you're going to be inhibiting brain and cardiovascular health, you're going to be inhibiting your kidney health potentially. All around, I don't think this compound really has a place in many enhancement protocols. Maybe it has a time and place for certain like niche scenarios, but in general, it seems pretty suboptimal to me. And it's going to be inhibiting a lot of downstream functions, not only from a health context, but from an actual muscle building and strength context. So to me, it just, you know, doesn't look too good for EQ. And that is what I think is the thing that is occurring where it lowers estradiol levels. I think that is the mechanism. And I don't think it is metabolites of EQ. I think it is simply the inherent activity of the compound itself and its interaction with aromatase and its conversion to estrone and blah, blah, blah. So take from that what you will. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you want to check out that Reddit thread, I highly recommend you do because you can actually dig into the studies yourself and make your own conclusions. And yeah, please like and subscribe. This was a long video, but hopefully an informative one. And I feel like very warranted and long overdue. It's been on my to-do list for a while, and I just haven't got around to it. Maybe because it was a really long one. I don't know. I just kind of overlooked it for a while, but it is a very important one, and I feel needs to be brought to the surface and circulated and talked about because a lot of people use EQ indiscriminately without really understanding how it works, or potentially even fucking themselves up and getting worse gains as a result of it too, maybe. So let me know what you guys think. Comments down below. All the comments help the algorithm, so they're much appreciated. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram. Actually follow, because it, I don't know, probably boosts the algorithm there. The comments there help the videos there too. I post the same videos there, and I post on my stories unique stuff sometimes, so that's worth checking out. It's good to diversify on different platforms. Facebook, the organic reach sucks balls. So if you can follow me on Facebook, that'd be great. Twitter, Snapchat, BitChute, TikTok, Apple Podcasts if you want to listen on audio. Obviously, it's if you don't want to burn through your data, listening on audio is probably a good idea. I listen to podcasts all the time while I'm driving. The only way I'm going to be able to do that is with audio, unless I want to destroy my data, because I can't watch YouTube videos in the car. So yeah, I'll play it on audio, and I recommend you guys subscribe to the podcast in the description below, and if you can drop a 5-star rating, that really helps the algorithm there, I'm sure. So that's much appreciated. If you want to support the channel, check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, if you are seeking hormone optimization or feel you would benefit from TRT, or get your general health status just evaluated and see if you have any imbalances or deficiencies that may warrant addressing and benefit you in a quality and quality of life and longevity context, I highly recommend you reach out to them. The patient care coordinators are well qualified and will take a look at your situation, get you the proper blood tests that you need, and run through them with you and kind of go through if you have any deficiencies or imbalances, like I said. And if warranted, then the doctor will talk to you over Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, whatever is convenient for you. It's all done via telemedicine, and from there you'll get a prescription for whatever medications you need to optimize your current state, and you can save $50 off of your first treatment with the coupon code MPMD50. Links in the description below. And my nootropic and pre-workout formulas linked in the description below as well. Gorilla Mind, Gorilla Mode. Pre-workout, self-explanatory what they do. Just compare the label of mine to yours in your, house right now. And I think it's pretty transparent what, sets us apart in terms of the dosages and the synergy of the compound selected. And as well as the nootropics, I feel they are easily the best in the industry for productivity, focus, energy, mental clarity, just being on the ball and getting way more shit done for students, entrepreneurs, anybody working and needs just an edge in the workplace, to be honest. They're really beneficial, in my opinion, for getting more work done, getting higher quality, and perhaps even more creative work done as well. And then anything else I'm associated with, video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.